Good afternoon. My name is Eric Woodard. I am director of the Smithsonian Office of Fellowships and Internships. And welcome to the Smithsonian Here to Career webinar. Today we're speaking with three of the Smithsonian Institution's preeminent archivists. And if you were smart enough to join us here today, I salute you and especially if you are interested in any kind of career dealing with archiving, this is the place for you. For those of you who haven't joined our Here to Career webinars before, we're so glad you have this time. And if you're a repeat offender, you'll know how this works. A lot of times what we do is we'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and one of which we may have a little bit of a technical thing going on, but we'll figure it out, don't worry. We'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we take questions, which means we rely on you to ask good questions. And you can do it a bunch of different ways. You can raise your hand using Zoom. If you know how to do that, there's a Q&A module. You can use the chat. I will look out for you. And if you have a microphone, you can ask it live on the air. And if you don't, I'll be happy to read your question for you. And as always, when we're done with this, we'll repost it on the Smithsonian OFI website and on our Facebook page, so you can watch it again there or share with friends. But without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Tammy Peters in the hope that she could tell us a little bit about her story. Tammy, what's your story? Take it away.
Hi. So I started as an intern at the Smithsonian Archives in 1994. I got a master's, or I have a history degree, a bachelor's degree in history, and an MA in American Studies. I did not get an archives library degree because I thought it would be boring to go to school to study cataloging. So American Studies meant literally, my main papers were about television and meta stories. So I literally watched television to get my master's degree. Might be lazy, but anyway, started at the archives. They kept me on as a contractor for a period of time. And an opening came up, and I waited 7 months because federal human resources, hey Ellen, human resources in the federal government can take a long time. But I started at the archives in May of 1995, so this is my 25th anniversary. I've sort of worked my way up doing a variety of jobs in the archives, reference, also on our what was then called our records management team. So a lot of box moving, deciding what could come to the archives. I oversee now the reference team and the archives and information management team, and am currently interim director of the archives. We're integrating with the libraries. So when we hire a new director, hopefully I'll still be the archivist at the Smithsonian Archives.
Awesome. That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So we're already starting to get questions. You guys are amazing. This filled up really quick. And Ellen, welcome. You're right on time. Can you hear us okay?
Sorry, I was having trouble with my computer.
You're fine. Welcome to the age of COVID. There's another window here I'm going to close, okay, just to make everybody's screen bigger.
That's okay. The one that comes through my computer at the office.
That's okay, but it won't mess you up if I close it, right?
No.
Okay, perfect. You're fine. Just catch your breath, and we'll turn it over to Jennifer. Jennifer, what is your story?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Wright. Growing up, I always intended on being a teacher. I went to do my undergraduate degree in history. Just figured out pretty early on that classroom management was not really my thing, and that was a pretty critical part of being a teacher. So I thought, well, I'll get my graduate degree and become a professor. And I submitted all of my grad school applications, spent lots of money on that, and quickly realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do either. In the meantime, I had an assistantship in our university archives. I went to Susquehanna University, which at the time, I think it's a little bigger now, but at the time it was about 1,500 students. The archives was a little room in the basement, sort of managed jointly by one of the librarians and one of the history professors. So working in there, I was mostly working on my own, doing my own thing with minimal training. So at that point, my history professor said, well, if you don't want to go to grad school for history, you seem to like this archives thing, which at that point, because I had never actually even seen anyone working in the archives other than myself and a couple of student workers, it had never really occurred to me it was a career. The next thing I knew, I was getting my NLS from University of Maryland and working at the National Archives as a student technician. At that time, it was actually not the common path to getting into archives. Typically at that point, to become an archivist, you had a history degree. And so the MLS path was still pretty novel. University of Maryland had one of probably only about 20 programs in the country at that point that had a focus on archives and records management. My position at the National Archives was contingent on me being a student. So my last semester, I started applying to jobs. A lot of the federal government agencies started a hiring freeze, and I lucked out. Smithsonian was the only application I put out that they hadn't changed their minds and not hired anyone. So there was a bit of luck in there. So I am now, at the time, I was on the records management team. Tammy was my team leader. And now, 19 years later, I am what is now the Archives and Information Management team. And I am the team leader and have been for a while now. And we do everything from providing records management guidance to working with offices around the Smithsonian to help them set up their electronic files or clean up their electronic files, web archiving, bringing in new accessions of paper and electronic files, doing all the processing and rehousing and description, and basically everything that needs to be done up to the point where the reference team can take over and researchers can start using the materials.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I have so many questions though, and I know, and you should see these questions rolling in. You guys it's unprecedented. Who knew that people would have so many questions about archivists?
Archivist rule.
Archivist rule.
Archivist rule.
Hey, Ellen, if you would tell just a little bit, how did you get to be and do what you do and who you are? Lay it on us.
I think basically what I do at the Smithsonian Archives is to be, I'm a reference archivist, which means I get to answer questions every day from people that are kids doing a History Day project all the way to historians and people fact checking for news stories and publications and things like that. I came to it like Tammy and Jennifer, maybe not in a very conventional way. I studied classics at St. John's College in Annapolis. And I think what that trained me to do was just to be exceptionally curious and made my mind work in a very lateral sense. It's like, oh, there's something about this. Let's see how that's connected to that. So it's a very interdisciplinary education. And I guess I was innately curious, but I like to go down a rabbit hole of, somebody asks me a question, or if I have a question, I want to go down a rabbit hole. I started out, not with a history background. I didn't go to a conventional college. But I found myself working, my first job was actually at the Smithsonian. And I worked as a mover packer person. They were moving collections. So I learned about collections management, the collections management software and all of that sort of thing. So I was engaged in that. And then I went over and took care of a mosquito collection for a time. And that was on soft money, and that ran out, and I found myself looking for a job, and I ended up at eventually at the Maryland State Archives, where I dealt with colonial records all the way through administrative, legislative records. I was there for 10 years, and a job came up with the Smithsonian Institution Archives, and I lived in the District of Columbia, so I thought, well, it'd be nicer to be a little closer to home. I have experience with Smithsonian collections, and so I made an application. Tammy interviewed me, and I too started out on the records management team, hauling boxes and stuff like that. Later on, I discovered that one of the things I really enjoyed doing was answering those questions that people would have, and I helped out the reference archivist with that. You know, she could say, where would I find this? How do I get into this collection? And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that, solving a mystery every day and never knowing what it was going to be. And that's how 22 years of, working at the Maryland, at the Smithsonian Archives has just really been a joy. But it's very unconventional. I was an apt pupil as much as anything else when I went to the Maryland State Archives and honed my reference skills there, and I was able to transfer that to the Smithsonian. So that's my story.
I'll tell you, it's clear to me that you guys have a lot of, I talk a lot about career stuff, and you guys have, just what you give me so far has been a ton of career wisdom. So just so you know, we've never gotten this many questions this early on a webinar. So I don't know what kind of Jedi magic voodoo you guys are pulling off here. There's a lot of questions. So if we're going to try to get them as many as we can, but don't feel like you got to fill the time here, guys, because we got a lot of them. So we're going to start with Katie Ronkin. Katie, can you hear us, and can we hear you?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you too. Go ahead, Katie. Thanks for your question. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for doing this. My question is, how can you get experience with preservation and conservation as an undergrad? It's something I'm really interested in, but it seems like any learning opportunities are restricted to master's students or having a lot of experience already.
Great question, Katie. Who wants it?
Yeah.
Who wants it? Tammy, what do you think?
I'll start. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities. I mean, search for internships. In our archives, we're not snobby. I don't care if you have a master's. There's things that you can learn to help us out. So you can, well, we're not taking physical interns right now, but we're only taking virtual interns. But also you can, does your college have an archives? Is there something you can help out with, or preservation department? Is there a historical society nearby that wants volunteers? So looking for those volunteer and internship possibilities is a good way to get experience.
Absolutely. Jennifer and Ellen, anything more to add?
I was just thinking, go ahead, Ellen.
I would say something similar to Tammy. I think looking at your resources that are closest to you is a thing that I think it could be tremendously valuable. You don't need to go far. Don't think, oh, I've got to go to this university or something. Just look close to where you are, and volunteering is a great way to do it. And because you can dip your toe in and decide, is this really where I want to go? Is this what I want to do? Is this too tedious? And you've not spent a lot of money. You've not invested a lot of time into making an application or getting background in chemistry and that sort of thing. You've gotten a chance to dip your toe in without making a heavy investment in it. So that's one thing I would advise.
Jennifer, anything more?
I would also say that, a lot of archives have videos on their YouTubes or website, that show a conservator doing something and explaining how to do it. And you can also, when you have time, look around at garage sales, flea markets, see if you come across, old photos or papers, things that you can pick up for real cheap and, that have damage, and see if you can find a tutorial and, try it yourself.
Wow. I think Jennifer just blew my mind with that one. That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. So it sounds like Ross Chertel. Ross, did you have a question?
Well, my question was just an overlap of general Smithsonian archives to the specialized archives of the Smithsonian, including the Archives of American Art. Do you have understanding of what they are looking for with their processes of hiring or moving into that field?
Thanks so much, Ross. Go ahead.
Their process of hiring?
No, like what you might need specifically to move into a specialized archival field of specialized in art history archives. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
thank you.
We've had this question before. Say the Air and Space Archives was wondering, do they need somebody who has expertise in aeronautics or space history? And honestly, our advice to them was get an archivist who knows what they're doing, sort of the best practices and things like that. And you can learn the collection. And I think with any archives, it's going to be different because the collection is different. And so you have to dive in. And when you get the job, you have the skills as an archivist, and then you apply it to the quirky collections that are going to be there. That's a huge part of starting at the Smithsonian Archives. Is we got some weird collections with indexes and numbers and things that you have to follow with charts to get through. But Archives of American Art is also going to be different. You're going to learn their collections, but it's get that base. And you can pop in anywhere and learn about the collection.
The stories these guys could tell. It's awesome. So thank you for that question, Ross. Julie Rockwell, it sounded like you had a question. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Go for it.
Well, I'm so excited. Hi, everyone. I had an internship at the Smithsonian Archives in the winter. So
really?
It was awesome. Yes.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And hi to Jennifer and to Ellen. It was awesome. And
Hey,
Garrett, you were awesome with all my paperwork. So I'm going to be finished. What's that?
I saw it was like Julie Rock. Oh my God.
I know. I was very soon I'm very soon at the end of the year going to finish my master's degree in museum studies and the certificate in digital curation at Johns Hopkins online program. Highly recommend it. The next step is I just joined SAA, the Society of American Archivists, and is becoming a certified archivist a valuable career move? Or, what's your take on certifications?
Jennifer, what do you think about that?
So that is something that's really going to depend. In the federal government, it is not something that is required or expected. I think very few people in the federal government have archival, the certified archivist designation. Some institutions though insist if you're not a certified archivist, we're not going to hire you. And I think that comes from that time span 15, 20 years ago, as when I was entering the field, where archival programs were still fairly uncommon. And so there were a lot of people coming into the field who didn't have the education in archives. And so the certified archivist program was sort of a way of leveling the playing field so that you could guarantee that everyone had similar types of education. And I know that that it was very controversial for a while. I have not seen nearly as much about it recently, so I don't know if it's actually still true that a lot of institutions require it. But a lot of institutions do not, and certainly the federal government does not.
Awesome. Julie, thank you so much again for that question. Hey, Karen Walsh, it sounded like you had a question. If you're there.
Hi, I'm here.
Yeah, speak really loud and we can hear you. Thank you so much for your question. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if you guys have any entomology related archives and if it's possible to work as an archivist within MS in biology.
That's awesome. Ellen, what do you think?
Absolutely. We have collections from the entomological collections, the natural, because it's the Smithsonian Institution archives, we take care of the institutional records. And that encompasses the Natural History Museum. So if you have that kind of subject expertise in entomology, these are certainly, I mean, it's you know, it's really not, it's not critical that that you have this history background. I think if you have an MS in, you know, biology or zoology, it's certainly helpful because you've done research, you understand the papers and the properties and of that scientific endeavor. So I would say it would be, it's certainly not a problem. I mean, it's an asset. You understand things like nomenclature probably better than I do. Although I have a lot of experience looking through these names. But you probably would bring to it a certain understanding. You may understand, you know, collectors of the past who may have worked with the Smithsonian. So I think you have something to offer, certainly.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciate your question. It sounded like Jacob Naimiak. I may be murdering your name there, Jacob, but are you there? Make sure you're not. We'll make sure you're not muted, Jacob. Sorry, Jacob. Are you there? Jacob may not have a microphone. It's okay.
Well, it says he's on mute.
Yeah, but it won't unmute. That's okay. That's okay. Jacob, you may, I thought you had a really great question. Oh, there he is. Jacob, are you there? No, that's okay. So Jacob was asking, just for your guys' take on, like, you know, in this ever increasing age of digitization and commodification, how does a museum determine which objects of the modern world would be included in a collection, even stuff like graffiti and ephemera and advertisements? And, you know, I think that's especially important given this, you know, these historical moments our nation's having right now. Tammy, what, you know, how do you figure out what to keep and what not to?
Well, I mean, it starts with a collecting policy, but that can be, I mean, that's a living document. The American History Museum is actively collecting things related to the COVID pandemic and the racism pandemic. And, you know, I've talked to one curator over there sort of about how they're choosing stuff. You know, they're not taking everything, but, you know, maybe 10 of something, but they're getting tons of emails from people with pictures and things. And they're seriously thinking about just keeping those emails and the pictures rather than a, you know, physical collection to tell the story of the time we're going through. So curators have established that collecting policy. Sometimes it's bureaucratic and it goes through, you know, a collecting acquisitions committee or something like that. But you know, that's how museums work. And as far as our archives, you know, we're the institutional archives, so we're documenting Smithsonian history. So as far as COVID and the protests that are going on, it's really how the Smithsonian is reacting is what we're going to collect in the future. And that's emails and websites and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Jacob, thank you so much for your question. I'm actually going to do something I haven't actually done. We've actually got a couple of people, and I'm going to make them live, sort of in turn. Amy Poe, you had a question, and I'm also going to try and make Kai Walther and Garrett Chanel live too, because they sort of had a similar question. But you go ahead, Amy.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you everyone for being here. My question was with regard to if you're coming from a background as a career changer with lots of education. I have a BA in French, I have an MBA. I recently finished my MLIS and I did core coursework in archival studies. Is an internship still a good entry point into the profession, or should you be looking in a different direction? What's the best way to get experience and be a contributor?
That's awesome. And Kai, can we hear you? Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead, man.
I'm doing my master's in public history right now, but still interested in being an archivist. Is it still possible to not have an MLS to work as an archivist? I know some of you had masters in American studies, I think, Tammy, you said, and then Ellen in classics. Is that still something that I could do, or do I need that MLS to be an archivist?
And Garrett, you sort of had a similar question, if we can hear you too.
Yeah, can you hear me?
You sure can, go for it.
Okay, yeah, so I just graduated last month actually with a undergrad in history, and I've been working in libraries and archives all 4 years in college. So I know like that's what I want to do career path-wise. So I'm kind of debating right now, do I go straight into grad school, stuff like that? Or do you all have a different path that you recommend, like looking into, stuff like that? So thank you.
I so appreciate your guys' questions. I'm going to leave you live here for a second, and you take it away, archival wizards. What do you? How are you going to help
wizards,
aspiring genius, early professionals?
Okay, well, there's quite a lot to address there. I mean, I think an internship is always good. You're getting experience and you're putting that on your resume. Changing careers, that's fine. Internships and volunteering is proving your practical experience in addition to your schoolwork. As far as whether you need a MLS or not, more and more of the people we're hiring do have an MLS, but I don't require it. The last hire that I did is a woman who doesn't have, she didn't have archival experience really at all, but she organized files in an office. This was an entry-level position. It was a perfect place. She pays great attention to detail. That's important to us. So she's learning on the job in sort of a journeyman sort of way. It's all going to depend on the archives, though, what their sort of policy is. Some are more, I hate to say it, they're more uppity about the degree and things like that. But I do say that most of the people I've hired since Jennifer have had a degree. So, but not necessarily.
And Jennifer, Ellen, anything more to add to the?
Well, I think for at a larger archives, there's going to be a lot more wiggle room because there are going to be people who can train you in all of the tasks. And we often look at what sort of work you've done in the past, what classes you've taken. Archives is a lot of customer service, and so we look at do you have any sort of customer service backgrounds? Do you have experience in both leading and working as a team? But some of those soft skills, good communications, and so at a very small archives with a couple of people, they may really need someone who knows exactly what they're doing coming in because there's no one to train them to do anything. But I think in a larger archives, you can come in with a variety of backgrounds and experiences, and not everyone is able to do an internship or volunteering, even a paid internship. And I know we recognize that, and we're looking for someone who wants to learn and who has the basic skills, the personality traits that we think will do well.
So well said. Ellen, any other pearls of wisdom?
Well, I think the pearls have been laid out there because they've covered the waterfront. But I would really, Jennifer's point about customer service really hits home for me as a reference archivist, because I deal with people face to face a lot. And also through the records management, we essentially touch every part of the Smithsonian. And it's all about formulating relationships, whether that's through an email encounter or face to face with the reading room, or through consultation with offices. It's really or even donors, people who want to give you collections or work with you as a member of a team. It's all about relationships. That's a very important part of archives, because you're taking in the history, whether it's a donor's papers or their family papers or the papers of a particular scholar or scientist. For us, it is very, very important. So you have to be willing to work with people, although there are aspects of archives which are very, concentrated. If you like working independently and are good at that and are not really that extroverted, there's a place for you as well. But internships, history background is helpful, and definitely take your time, and if you can volunteer places, dip in and see what you like.
Thank you so much. Amy, Kai, and Garrett, did we do okay? Yeah, did we give you some answers, hopefully?
Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. So guys, we are supremely out of time. This is all flown by, but before I let you go, and our audience, you guys have been the most engaging audience we've had so far, and so many of you have stuck with us. There's just, somebody asked the question, of course they're anonymous, which drives me crazy because they can't make them live on the air, but they said, and just real quick, and I know you guys have had this question before, but Tammy, starting with you, what's the weirdest thing that you've come across as an archivist? I mean, just the quick version. No pressure.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of weird stuff. So when we were moving out of a facility, and this probably isn't my greatest story, but anyway, it's one that popped in. We were rehousing collections and then transferring them out to an offsite storage facility. So we were going through things, and there was somebody who worked at Air and Space, and he was doing research on radioactive things. And then there was, I was refoldering stuff, and I'm in my bare hands, and there was a specimen that just said X, and I was like, oh my God, is this radioactive? So we had to bring it back to the lab, and they brought the Geiger counter, and it wasn't radioactive, but there was a moment of, maybe I'm gonna start glowing in the dark.
Wow, that's really crazy. Jennifer, just briefly, what's your weirdest one?
Golden lion tamarin fur.
Wow.
It was the research files of one of the research zoologists at the National Zoo, Deborah Kleiman. And she was very much led the way to reintroducing golden lion tamarins in Brazil. And in one of her folders, there was just a baggie with golden lion tamarin fur in it.
Who doesn't need a little golden lion tamarin? Oh. I read one of yours, which blew my mind as I was getting ready for this in your bio. This is the letter that the poor woman had written like back in the early 20th century. I think that was you, where she was just had questions about basic human reproduction. And
yes,
I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
What's your weirdest one?
My weirdest one, I guess, it's not really weird, but it was really a delightful search. And I didn't think it was going to turn out the way it did. It was a genealogical question. It was like, this is many questions I get is like, the family lore is ... And this is, my father gave the first $1 for the capital campaign for the Smithsonian back in the 1920s. And he was like, 8 years old. And I was like, well, tell me, first of all, what's his name? And his name was Orrin Nash. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll give it the college try. I'll look. But I don't know whether I'm going to find this. He was from Chicago, and I looked him up, Orrin Nash, in the card indexes, and found that he had, in fact, sent $1 to the head of the Board of Regents, who at that time was William Howard Taft,
Of course.
who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He's a regent at the Smithsonian. And there was a letter from Taft to Secretary Walcott. And he said, well, here's the first donation.
Wow.
And it was I found his letter written in his childish cursive saying, I heard about your campaign, and I'm sending to you $1 that I earned myself. And I hope this is helpful. And Secretary Walcott wrote back a 2-page letter, and it was like, Dear Master Nash, and he went on, and he said, I, having once been a boy myself, I could think of many things to spend my dollars on, but that you send it to us, who knows what secret of nature may be revealed with your support that, will go down to the generations. And I thought it was just the sweetest letter. And the beauty of it was that it was all preserved. It was saved.
Yep.
And I was able to provide that to his family. So there was, copies of that to his family.
You know why there were copies of that? Because there was an archivist that saved it. My God.
Right, there was somebody who saved it, and we preserved it, and you have us to thank.
Well, gosh, guys, for all of you who've stuck with us so long, we've gone way over. And for Jennifer, Tammy, and Ellen, thank you so much. This has been one of my favorite ones. And thank you for all you do. And for the person 100 years from now that's going to find the stuff that you're archiving on their behalf, thank you. Thank you. And if you joined us here today for this Here to Career webinar, I'd like to honor you for your wisdom in doing so. Thank you for your amazing participation. Sorry if you asked a question and we couldn't get to you. But again, we'll have this up as a re-recording. You can watch it as many times as you want. Maybe it'll wind up in the archives. And but either way, just like to thank you for being here. Again, my name is Eric Woodard, and on behalf of the Smithsonian Institution, thanks for joining us today, and have a great day. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you.